personnel costs more, increments, cost more, and things like that. I can tell you that we did put in another line item for at least $100,000 because, again, we know that there are certain things that will be required for us to produce a change in our posse system to comply with the federal requirement. So that is at least one item. We are also contemplating in fiscal year 2018 issuing competitively, of course, in accordance with the laws, an RFP for the update of the guidelines. The guidelines were last updated in 2009. They need to be updated every 4 years. We need to issue to get consultation. The guidelines take into account when they calculate what the cost is of raising a child and how many children, what a self-maintenance allowance should be associated, for example, with the cost of living. So those are financial industry applications that are beyond the scope, right, of the employees of the office. So we imagine that we are going to incur some costs in that as well.
Senator, if I can answer your question directly, yes, we're requesting for 2018 $255,792. That's you're referring to. That did not show in our 2017 budget because we were able, through the work of Mr. Paulino, make an assessment of the carryovers of local funding affecting child support for several years. And so there was a stockpile. And what we required in 2017, if not 2016, we needed to exhaust those carryovers. The local funding for child support does not lapse. It continues year after year. So any carryover that child support will have by legislation, by law, continues because of the federal matching. So what we did in prior years, we said to child support, you've got some carryover, exhaust it, clear that off the books. And Mr. Paulino was very helpful with that. Clear that off the books. So now with the $255,000, that's a real need for child support.
Okay. All right, and all right. So, but you're going to incur $100,000. Is that right? To contract somebody to help prepare the guidelines or to review the guidelines?
And of course, this is the difficulty with procurement. We're taking a ballpark figure. We don't have the exact amount, and we haven't put that in there. But
has that resulted in the past in significant changes for Guam versus other jurisdictions? I mean, that we need to, that we're not just able to follow another jurisdiction?
We're required to update our own guidelines. So every jurisdiction has to do that.
All right. Okay, all right, thank you very much. And I want to thank again Ken Orcutt for the update on the litigation and your whole staff for the update on the litigation and our briefing the other day. That's very helpful. And we received this morning an update on the land registration that the Attorney General's office is moving on. So,
Senator, I want to thank you for bringing that to light because those cases were just lost by the judiciary and by our office, the LRs. And because of your attention to that, we are activating and we'll be getting to those registrations. Thank you.
So just ask me, Mr. Speaker, and hafa day, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging in with us this morning. I just want to point out that I think this is the most attorneys we've ever had in this public hearing room at one time, so I feel like I'm in good company. As Legislative Secretary, budget transfers, which are within your authority, come through my office. I've seen a number of budget transfers to cover your rent, which we all know, the Office of the Attorney General has some of the largest rental expenses in the government of Guam. So I just wanted to ask you, how is your rent budgeted, and why is the number of transfers necessary?
In prior years, the rental was categorized in the administration division, so it tended to bloat the administration division. And under performance-based budgeting, we have taken the rent and we have parceled that out to the various divisions. Like you, Senator, I asked my chief of staff, why do I keep signing these transfers? Well, Senator, it's because we've parceled out the rent, each of the divisions, and from the division we have to bring it back to administration to pay the rent.
Thank you. In capital outlay, the Office of the Attorney General is requesting for electronic document data management servers and software. This item wasn't listed in last year's budget, so I'm just wondering if you could help me to understand the need for the servers and software, and is maybe this something that the Office of Technology could work with your office to accomplish?
Jackie? We'd like to procure an electronic document management solution, not only for the OAG, but for the CSED side of the house. So you'll see some dual costs there. We need technology to better manage the paper that we have. Quite frankly, the only division currently automated is prosecution. So we're trying to work with the judiciary currently. I believe they're taking out a loan. I believe that's moved forward. We're going to try to get them to procure a case management system for litigation division. So the document management solution really is to help us tie up all of our paperwork across divisions.
Thank you. You also mentioned, I think it's on page 4, so in the VOCA grant slide, you talked about AVINS, automated
Victim Information Notification System.
Right. Can you explain that to me in further detail?
Absolutely. Currently, in order to inform victims whether their case is on schedule, whether it's been continued, or there's been a change in the custody of a defendant, perhaps released, there is, throughout the nation, all states have automated victim information systems. Guam sort of missed the boat on that when there were some federal funds. Nonetheless, we have asked the Office of Victims of Crime whether we could use our federal grant money, that 1.1 and 1.3 that we get from the federal government and Congress, to set up an automated system. And how it would run is this: a victim would register, would be given a PIN number. And if there is any change in the hearing or the custody of the defendant, the victim can call in with the registry number and get the updated information. Certain information is sent to the victim without the victim having to call in, such as change in custody, or if the defendant has been rearrested during pretrial release. And the type of systems that are out there, there is one particular company who expressed interest. We sent out a request for interest a couple of months ago. The off-island company who has set up this system, which is called Vine. It's a proprietary system, and Vine is in most of the states. It's called Victim Information Every Day. Victim Information Notification Every Day, Vine. So that's a vendor that's expressed interest. We have been working with trying to figure out what would be the specifications in an RFP. We went to Hawaii, looked at their automated system. There's a particular separate office in Hawaii. It's tied in with their corrections department. We are looking at setting it up in the Attorney General's office, working with the Department of Corrections, getting that data and information in so that it's, you call in, is my hearing on, has it been changed, is the defendant in or out?
Thank you so much for that clarification. I wholeheartedly support this effort. I think that, it could have, I had a personal experience with this, and somebody in my family was a victim of crime, and many years ago we had to continue calling in, and we also have some members of my family that have English as a second language, so there's that language barrier issue. And I think just increasing communication and making sure that our public knows any changes in custody, any rearrests, I think are extremely valuable so that these victims of crime don't continue to live in fear. And they're also it's very clear about the process and where we are in that process. And I think that'll help them a lot just to better manage their own daily struggles, but to keep an eye on things. And it gives I think the public an assurance that your office is continuing to do a great service and continuing to do a good job for the people of Guam. So I want to thank you so much for that, Supervisor Maasi.
Well, we're hoping that we will have specifications to be in other languages. That's absolutely critical.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's a perfect segue for my last question.
Okay.
You mentioned Hawaii has a separate office for the victims' advocates.
For the victim notification, yes. Mm-hmm.
Before you assumed the position, we had discussions about Vero being within the Attorney General's office and concerns about conflicts and whether or not they were being properly utilized, whether they were assistants to the prosecutors or they were victim advocates. Mm-hmm. After a year and a half, do you still believe that this should be within the Attorney General's office, or should we go to where I thought we were talking about before you assumed the office, that we should have an NGO or a nonprofit outside or somebody outside handle that operation? And a year and a half in, and you still have it, and now you're actually increasing the staff.
The victim notification unit is locally funded, so we're not going to have that audit exception from the Victims of Crime Act that federal funds can only be used for direct victim services. So we are now separating the victim notification in prosecutor's office. We're going to have 4 staff there. They are there to assist the victim through the criminal justice process. Getting back now to your, and I agree with you, I come back 25 years later, and victim services and a large chunk of the federal grant money is going to our office. It was VUAS. It is now Victim Service Center. Senator, one of the requirements under the $1 million grant that we have is very stringent requirements that any vendor who takes over a very massive operations is able to handle that. I have not heard from Barrow or Erica's House or Sanctuary or any of those. I mean, they have such clear focuses on what they can do and their capacities and what they can do. So the Office of the Attorney General continues under the Victim Service Center to service the victims of crime, separate and apart now from the prosecutor's office. If that unit can be run by a nonprofit, absolutely. It's kind of incestuous that we sort of grant to ourselves. I always thought that. 25 years ago, we were granting to ourselves a bit incestuous. I come back 25 years later, and you're correct, Senator, that the office continues to hold on to this large chunk of money. I don't have a NGO out there that has really stepped forward and said, we'll take over all your advocates. One of the advantages, and I'll be honest with you, we have 7 federally funded advocates. They're unclassified. They're building up government service. So if we want to privatize this, look at privatizing the Victim Service Center as GTA was privatized. It can be done. It can be done. Or even GWSA, if it goes privatized, those government employees, if tomorrow I said, Victim Service Center is not being funded under the federal grant, your service to the government of Guam is very appreciated, and we are going to go out nonprofit. You can apply for any other position throughout the government of Guam that your experience qualifies you for. That can be done, but it's a very sensitive process to do that. So I'm not going to say to the victim advocates at Victim Service Center that tomorrow your jobs are gone and it's going to a nonprofit. it's something that I can't do in 2 years. I come back 25 years later, it still hasn't been done. But what I have accomplished, Senator, and I have accomplished, is to bifurcate the work of victim advocates, the prosecutor's office, purely prosecution and locally funded. I've now bifurcated Victim Service Center 100% federally funded. They are not there to service the prosecutor anymore. They are there to service the victim. And what we'd like to try and do with the Victim Service Center is expand those services to victims of crime, maybe at the early stages of arrest at GPD. With victim compensation awards, how do I go about getting my compensation application? A lot of our VSC advocates do help the applicants through the criminal injuries compensation process. They sit with the applicants when the commission meets to make an award on an application for compensation. So the role of the victim service advocates is evolving, Senator, and I ask you to join with me. Hopefully at the end of my tenure, either Victim Service Center becomes its own nonprofit, and one of those advocates says, I know how to operate this, and I want to apply. But it means that we shut down the government portion of it and the benefits.
And the thing is that the one good thing about it being in your office is that if I get a phone call by a victim that they've not been notified, I can call one of the two of you, and it's addressed. But that's just the very, very, very tip of the iceberg, because I'm still hearing that victims are not being advised of the plea agreements that are being negotiated. And whether or not I'm not suggesting that they should have veto power over it, but they should at least be informed and advised that this negotiation is underway, and if they want to participate and have their voice heard, that they should speak up. Not everybody is like the few that you and I have spoken to. And we've had this running issue with the office about whether or not what I was promised several years ago about judges asking whether or not the victim has been notified of today's hearing, whether or not the victim is aware of this agreement, whether or not the victim, that I'm still not, at least myself, I'm not satisfied that.
Well, Senator, I'm not satisfied either.
And that is being done, and
I share very strongly your victim advocacy, absolutely. And it's having to recreate, to change a 25-year culture of the way certain things have been done. Mr. Tadinko and his staff and the prosecution teams now will be supplemented by victim advocates that aren't this federal funded, no, you can't read the plea agreements, or you can read the plea agreements. So the prosecution division will have these victim advocates working with these teams. I have informed the federally funded advocates they cannot read a plea offer, nor can they read a plea. That's not their job or their role. So what I've been able to do, Senator, in retooling and restructuring this 25-year VWAS.
So now we have two sets of
Senator.
People locally funded and federally funded, and
we have to have
it's gotten bigger, and now we have more people that are getting government service and going to have 36 years and making more than my attorneys that are doing the prosecution.
Senator, that's what the victim notification unit is separate and apart from VSC.
That was not the purpose of it, to give them the government service so that they can make more than the attorneys.
I agree, Senator, I agree.
It's so that they can keep somebody be responsible for making sure that all the victims know this is what's happening to your case, this is your hearing date. They don't get called at 8 o'clock in the morning that it's a 9 o'clock court appearance. And I'm still not happy with the way that that's being done, and I don't know whether or not doubling the staff and the budget and being concerned about whether or not they're going to get continued government service is of anything to me.
It's the way to go, Speaker, with all due respect. That's why we're trying to think out of the box with the having the victim notification unit. Certainly we never envisioned having to dedicate a part of the system to keep track of the ever-changing dates and the pleas and so forth. So the vision when the general came in was how we address this victim notification issue and get out of the morass of the restrictions that the feds put on us by having advocates who traditionally did that for us and were part of that system. So I think that we all share that need to, we know our obligations under the Bill of Rights, and this is part of trying to think out of the box of how to hit it squarely. And no one likes the idea of throwing more money, more people, more staff at it, but that's the way to go. And if there's a better model with an NGO to take that over and interfaces with the court, I mean, we all got to look at these potential solutions or ideas to try to address that. Because yes, and it's always ever changing, and it's not unusual, and that's why part of our issue is with the notification unit is to be able to document and record all the attempts, including texting them, and because most people now the only way to contact folks is through the texting system to get a hold of them, and it is always disturbing to hear that someone says they weren't informed or advised of it, and we try to do that even as it changes, even on the eve of trial, or during trial, when sometimes pleas go down right in there, and we have to stop and try to get the victim over. So.
Some of the advocates from VSC are going into this unit.
So we're shifting
from VSC over there to the VNU and have that fully locally operating and to build, along with the automated victim notification system, something that works. With regard to the Victim Service Center that could have, years past, been a nonprofit, that could still be the future of the Victim Service Center. I'm not saying that I'm opposed to that. What I've had to try to do is to bifurcate this system between what the prosecutor's office needs in order to proceed forward with a trial and notify the victim with regards to victim service needs in other areas.
Okay. I'll
patient a little bit more.
A year and a half. I will probably be posing a separate question to you in writing on another issue. But thank you all. This budget hearing is now recessed until tomorrow at 2, when the Budget Appropriations Committee will be meeting with Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. Thank you.